Okay, so today I've got a 2010 Ford F-150, 5.4 liter. We're gonna be changing out the spark plugs. Okay, so we've got our new spark plugs. Before we even get started on taking things off the truck, first thing that should happen, well, it doesn't matter if it happens first, but always double check the gap of the new spark plug. Okay, so after tapping over and over and rechecking, we can go back here and I'll show you. Finally got it set. It's just, yeah, it's 44, 45. It's a tight 45, so that's perfectly fine. Oh, and these are the plugs we are putting in it. Iridiums, 372s. A little technical info on this particular engine. The 3-valve 5.4 liters were notorious for breaking spark plugs off in the head between, I can't remember the exact year, but it was the first year the 3-valve came out, and I believe it was up to 2008 or somewhere in 2009. And then somewhere in around that 2009 year, they fixed it. They got rid of the 2-piece spark plug. They now have the ones that I was just gapping. If you do have one of the spark plugs for the 2008 and earlier models with the 2-piece, only use the Champion spark plugs. I don't know the part number off the top of my head, but the Champion does make a 1-piece replacement. If nobody else has, I'm not really sure. I've just always bought the Champion ones if I'm doing the 2-piece spark plugs. However, the procedure to change the spark plugs will be exactly the same on this engine versus that engine with the 2-piece plugs. And if you do break one off, I'll have to make a video on that because I don't have one right now. That is not a job you really want to get into if you could avoid it, because if you can do it yourself, you're going to save yourself a whole lot of money, but it's not a fun job to do if the extraction tool fails. But that's a video for another day. Okay, so we're going to start taking stuff off the engine here to get access to the spark plugs. The driver's side is pretty much open. The spark plugs are, where are they here? They are kind of buried underneath. Oh no, they're not. They're right here. So here's the first ignition coil on that side, on the driver's side of the engine. It just goes one here, one underneath this hose right here, and then one right back right there. Those ones are super easy to get to, no issues whatsoever. There is, I don't believe there's locks on here. So here, just squeeze and remove. And then you've got one 8mm bolt right down here by my finger. You just unscrew this 8mm, oh frick. Yeah, unscrew this 8mm bolt right here and pull out the coil and take out the spark plug. We just got to remove the intake to get access to the passenger side. I've already uncoupled everything. The only thing here, a little note, is that this sensor has a lock on the bottom. So you need to get a little screwdriver in right underneath here and just push it back. I don't know why they couldn't have flipped that sensor over and made that accessible from the top. That's Ford for you. Anyways, yeah, take that out. Remove this whole assembly all together. And looks like all we're gonna have to do at this point, all we're gonna have to do at this point, it looks like, is take off this air box here, which is held on by one bolt right here, this clamp here, and it looks like that's it. And that will give us enough room. Actually, we probably wouldn't even have to take that off, because you can see the coils here, and then straight back here. So technically I don't have to take it off, but I will take it off only because, you know, you want room to swing your ratchet. There's nothing worse than working in a tight space. And for the extra 2 minutes it's going to take me to get that off, it's going to be well worth the hassle. One other thing I'm going to point out here is that before you take any coils off, make sure you take some compressed air and you blow out all around the coils, all in here where they sit down in the head here. You know, as soon as you remove those coils, if there's any dirt in there, it's going to fall down to the spark plug hole. And then as soon as you go to take your spark plug out, that dirt very likely is going to end up inside your combustion chamber. And well, that's just going to cause issues. Potentially, anyways. I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't do it and who walk away fine, but the possibility is there. And the last thing you want to do is increase any likelihood that something's going to happen to your engine internally. Also, trying to get this second screw out of the coil here, and although I did get it, it was kind of hard to get around this hose. And I'm the kind of person that I know that you could work around it, but I don't like to make my job any harder than it has to be. So I'm always in favor of removing, you know, an extra few things if it doesn't take a ton of extra time in order to make the job less frustrating and just go a little that much smoother. So this guy here, I'm gonna this gray plastic clip, got to lift it and push it back slightly, and it will, once you push it back and then down, you can then wiggle this hose right off, just like that. And just turn that over to the side. Now I've got nothing in my way. Okay, so I've got all the coils out and I've lined them up here. Now I've written them 1, 2, 3, 4, starting from the front of the engine. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I know that has nothing to do with the cylinder numbers or the firing order or anything like that. I'm simply labeling them for this side of the engine, 1, 2, 3, 4, front to back. That's just how I mark things so I know where they go. I try to only work on one side of the engine at a time. You know, just, you know, there's no reason. I mean, it really doesn't matter. You could do both sides at the same time. I prefer to do one side, get it back together, move to the other side, do that, so on and so forth. So this is not the firing order. This is simply me labeling them for my own, you know, methods of putting them back in the same place that I got them from. So now that I got a 9/16 socket on here, 12-inch extension, and you can see now why I removed that plastic air box, because I've got more than enough room to swing my ratchet around. Okay, so I've got the spark plug loose, completely loose in the spark plug hole. Now, there are spark plug sockets out there. I have them, but I generally don't tend to use them. I don't know why. I guess it's just one of those things. I just grab my socket, and then what I'll do to get them out is I'll just take an ignition coil, stick it down into here, and pull it out that way. That's how I prefer to do it. But I mean, they do have the spark plug sockets out there with that little rubber grommet in them that pulls it out. But anyways, this is just the way I do it. Okay, so I've pulled out one spark plug, and we can compare the two. This old spark plug, like, it looks good in terms of its coloring. You know, the insulation here is not, you know, it's not black, it's not burnt, it's not red. It's a nice kind of, that's what you want to see, kind of a nice off-white, tanned, maybe even slightly brown color. That would indicate, you know, good clean combustion in the cylinders. Here is that the electrode right here, the ground electrode, is starting to wear on a bit of an angle right in this area, right here. So when the spark is firing, it's hitting up in this corner region more than it is anywhere else because it's more worn out. Okay, so among pulling out the plugs, I came across something very interesting. This plug here came out of the very rear cylinder of the driver's side of the engine. I had noticed as soon as I pulled it out, the gap in this plug compared to, say, this is the plug from the second to the rear, looked significantly more. Let me see if I can get a good angle on this here. If we compare the two, it's hard to see, but I measured it, and there is almost a 10 thou difference between this one and this one. So why that is, I honestly couldn't tell you why. But that just goes to show you here, that this one is nearly 20 thou over what a new plug is gapped at. And yet I didn't have any misfires. This thing ran really, really well, actually. You know, the engine has 200,000 K. I'm assuming these plugs have been changed at least one time before this. So we got 60 thou gap on this guy, or sorry, 64, 65. This one's about 54, 55, and same with the other three, around 54, 55, where original spec is 44. So, goes to show you that new ignition systems are quite robust. Even at a 20 thou over gap, it was still running, you know, very well. Okay, one thing I want to point out here, on all spark plugs boxes, they will give you a torque amount. So they're saying screw it in finger tight and then turn it 1/16 of a turn tighter than finger tight. That's their torque spec, I guess. So okay, one more little piece of information when you're doing your spark plugs. You have your ignition coils off already. A good thing to check for is the boots. If there's any indication of carbon tracing, which you can see, well, these ones don't have it at all. But what you're gonna look for is right inside the tube here is a little white line, you know, traveling up, basically. Basically, you can look on both sides and just look as far as you can. It'll be quite obvious when you see it. It'll just be a little white line that's kind of etched into the side of the spark plug boot. And that's just a sign of like a misfire. It could have come from the spark plug, or it could just be a bad insulation in the boot and it's arcing outside the spark plug, which reduces your efficiency of your ignition system. So a really easy thing to do is just, this guy just slides onto here and pops on. Pull them off, give them a little quick look. You can put a little gob of dielectric grease on the tip here, and that's about it. Problem here. On the first spark plug here, I'm trying to get it off, and for some reason my socket wouldn't grab the spark plug. So I had to peek down the spark plug hole. I hope I can make this happen here. Right there, there's a rock stuck right beside the spark plug. So I've already tried to blow that rock out and it's not moving. So I have to get it out, and I'm not sure how I'm gonna do that yet. Rock out of the hole. So basically all I did there was the rock was wedged kind of in between, like right where the pointy part of the spark plug is, where your socket would go onto. I just got a wire down in there and I broke the rock loose from where it was kind of jammed in there, and then I just took my air gun and blew it and it just flew right out. Okay, so I have just finished replacing the spark plugs on the passenger side. It again was virtually the same process as doing the driver's side, but with nothing in the way to take off. Yes, I covered the battery because it was burning my arm. I think it's probably spewing out a little bit of battery acid mist or something like that, but I was resting on it, it was burning my arm. Anyways, yeah, put the airbox back on. Oh, and then also don't forget to put this breather hose back onto that connection on the valve cover. So I don't normally show what tools I use because a lot of the time, you know, it's a mix of everything just depending on the situation that I'm dealing with. But for this job, it was really straightforward. You know, not much can go wrong. Obviously, I did have that rock stuck in there, which took a little bit of, you know, messing around with to get it out. But I've never even had that before. That was my first time ever dealing with a rock in a spark plug hole. So anyways, that's also another reason why to make sure you always blow out your spark plug holes even after you take off your ignition coils. So anyways, here I'm going to show you what I used for this. So I got my spark plug gapper, flat blade screwdriver. That was just for taking off the intake clamps. This little small flat blade is what I used to get that locking clip off the mass airflow sensor. You just got it underneath and just pushed it. Now you don't have to use that, you could use anything small. This is my little 1/4 inch extension, which I used with my 7mm socket, and that was to get all the bolts off of the ignition coils. That combination worked for all 8 of the bolts. Here's for the spark plugs. I used my 12-inch. This is actually a wobble extension. If you see that end is a little, it's not square cut. It's got a little bit of a concave in it. So that way when you have your socket on it, you can go like this, and it's got that little bit of flex in there. Sometimes that's all you need. And that got all my spark plugs out without an issue. It got a little tight on the back 2 spark plugs on both sides, but there was enough room there, and I'm pretty sure it was to do with the wobble, because I was able to just angle it down enough and then get down on top of the spark plug. So that's what I used to get all the spark plugs out. This 10mm was simply just for getting that 1 bolt off of the that air box on the passenger or on the driver's side of the engine. Obviously a 1/4-inch ratchet, the 3/8 ratchet that goes onto there, that one, and this is my Milwaukee little what do you call it here, impact driver. And I got this in a kit with my electric drill. I'll have to say, this is probably one of the best tools ever, especially for getting a bunch of small little bolts off. Super handy. You know, I know they make these in like a 3/8 impact style and all that other stuff, and a 1/4-inch. You know, I find for the most part, this one is very universal, because I can use my adapters, right? I have my hex adapters to 1/4-inch. I have my 3/8. I have a 1/2-inch. And then also I can put in bits in here too. Like, if I ever need a bit, like a bit with a Torx on it, or a hex or anything like that, it all fits in here. Probably one of the most used tools I have. I've had this for probably, oh man, 4 years, 5 years now, and I've never had a single problem with it. Yeah. One last thing I forgot to show was my pliers. These are slip joint pliers. They open up slightly wider, like that. Just gives you a little bit more area to grab onto. I use those for pretty much all hose clamps. Unless they're super big hose clamps, then you need you know, some adjustable pliers or something like that. But no, this was a really straightforward job. Not a lot of tools required. I think anybody who wants to attempt to save themselves a few dollars at the dealer or at the shop to do their own spark plugs, it's totally doable by, you know, anybody who wants to do it. You know, it's easy to do.